For 3,000 years, people have argued about whether the Trojan War really happened. Homer's Iliad describes a 10-year siege, sparked by a stolen queen and a doomed city. For centuries, most historians dismissed it as pure legend, beautiful poetry, but not real history. Then archaeologists found the city of Troy itself, exactly where the legend said it would be. But finding the city wasn't the same as proving the war inside it ever happened. Now, brand new evidence from recent excavations may finally close that ancient gap. This is the story of how science is finally catching up to one of history's oldest legends. According to Homer, the war began with a stolen queen named Helen of Sparta. Paris, a prince of Troy, took Helen from her husband, the Spartan king Menelaus. In response, a massive Greek army sailed across the sea to lay siege to Troy itself. Homer says that siege lasted 10 brutal years, filled with heroes, gods, and tragedy. Eventually, the Greeks were said to have won using a legendary trick, the wooden horse. For most of history, this entire story was treated as beautiful fiction, nothing more. Even the city of Troy itself was widely assumed to be completely made up. That assumption held firm for over 2,000 years of recorded history. Then, in the 19th century, that certainty finally began to crack. In 1863, a researcher named Frank Calvert proposed a real location for the legendary city. In 1871, the famous excavator Heinrich Schliemann began digging at that very same site. What he uncovered stunned the world: the genuine remains of an ancient walled city. Troy was real, that much was suddenly, undeniably certain. But Schliemann's excavation methods were aggressive, and he damaged many important layers of the site. For over a century afterward, evidence of an actual war remained frustratingly incomplete. Troy the place was proven. Troy the war still needed far stronger evidence. That's exactly what a modern research team set out to find over a century later. The project is called Legacy for the Future, led by Professor Rustem Aslan. Aslan teaches at Canakkale Onsekiz Mart University, close to the ancient site itself. His team focused on one specific target: Troy's destruction layer from the late Bronze Age. That layer dates to roughly the 13th century BC, right around 1200 BC. Ancient Greek historians always place the Trojan War at almost exactly this same moment. The team focused their dig between the palace, the marketplace, and the city's defensive walls. In ancient Hittite records, this same city was known by another name entirely: Wilusa. That name appearing in real historical records was already a hint this city truly mattered. But the team needed something far more specific: direct evidence of actual combat. In the summer of 2024, they found exactly that, just outside the old palace walls. Dozens of smoothed clay and riverstone sling stones, packed tightly into one small area. Sling stones were common Bronze Age ammunition, hurled at enemies with lethal accuracy. Finding this many in one place suggested something intense had happened right there. As Professor Aslan explained, this density points to a desperate defense or a full assault. The stones themselves dated to between 3,200 and 3,600 years ago. That places them squarely within the traditional timeframe for the Trojan War. But the sling stones weren't alone. Arrowheads were found in that very same area too. In fact, researchers had found similar arrowheads in this exact spot the year before. That repetition strongly suggested this location saw fighting more than just once. Nearby, archaeologists also uncovered the remains of burned, collapsed buildings. And perhaps most striking of all, human skeletons buried quickly and without ceremony. That kind of rushed burial usually points to sudden crisis, not a slow, peaceful decline. To understand why this matters, it helps to know how massive the city of Troy actually was. Troy sat at a crucial location, guarding the entrance to the Dardanelles Strait. Whoever controlled Troy controlled trade routes connecting Europe and Asia. That made it an extremely valuable prize, well worth fighting over. This context matters because myths rarely form around places that don't actually matter. A legendary 10-year war needs a genuinely important city worth that much sacrifice. Troy fits that description perfectly, both in legend and in real economic importance. It's also worth understanding how archaeologists actually date a layer like this one. Each layer of soil represents a different period of the city's long, layered history. Burned material, pottery style, and organic remains all help pinpoint an exact time period. This careful method is what allowed researchers to confidently date the destruction layer. Without this precision, connecting the evidence to the Trojan War era wouldn't be possible. It's also worth remembering that Troy wasn't destroyed just once in its long history. Archaeologists have identified several distinct layers, each representing a different era of the city. The layer connected to the Trojan War is known specifically as Troy 6 and Troy 7. This specificity matters because earlier excavators sometimes confused different destruction events. Modern techniques have made this kind of precise identification far more reliable than before. That reliability is exactly why this new evidence carries so much genuine scientific weight. It's also worth asking, could this destruction have come from something other than warfare? Researchers did carefully consider natural disasters, like earthquakes or accidental fires. But weapons like sling stones and arrowheads don't appear during natural disasters. Their presence strongly points toward deliberate human conflict, not accidental destruction. That distinction is a crucial piece of the puzzle researchers had to rule out carefully. Good archaeology means checking every possible explanation before settling on the most likely one. That patient, careful process is exactly what makes this new evidence so genuinely convincing. Among all these dramatic finds, one small object added a surprisingly human detail. Archaeologists found a bone shaped and worn like a small gaming die. It likely belonged to a soldier, passing anxious time while waiting for battle to begin. That tiny detail turns distant legend into something startlingly personal and real. Real people once stood in this exact spot, nervous, waiting, and afraid. Legends can feel distant. A small, worn game piece brings it suddenly, unmistakably close. So does all of this finally prove the Trojan War exactly as Homer described it? Not exactly, and researchers are very careful to say so. Nobody has found direct evidence of Achilles, the gods, or a literal wooden horse. What researchers have found is something arguably more important: real evidence of real violence. A dense cluster of weapons, burned buildings, and hurried burials, all in the very same place. All dated to exactly the era ancient historians always associated with this legendary war. That's not proof of every detail in Homer's epic poem, but it's far more than simple myth. It suggests that somewhere beneath the poetry, an actual, brutal historical conflict occurred. Over centuries, that real conflict was retold, exaggerated, and eventually transformed into legend. That's often exactly how history and mythology intertwine, across nearly every ancient culture. Excavations at Troy are still ongoing, with each new season adding fresh pieces of evidence. Researchers hope future digs will reveal even clearer evidence of exactly what happened here. For now, one thing is clearer than ever: Troy wasn't just a beautiful story. It was a real place that likely faced a real, violent, and unforgettable ending. Somewhere between legend and evidence, the true story of Troy is still being uncovered. What other legendary stories do you think might be hiding real history underneath? If this story fascinated you, subscribe for more real evidence behind history's greatest legends. Troy, once dismissed as pure myth, now standing as one of history's most enduring true stories.